This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you!
Boring. Boring. Boring.
Okay, get into it. Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that. Remember what you're doing. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
Welcome, one and all, to Lembit Öpik Live here on Unprecedented TV, where we find the facts, kill the spin, and tell it like it is all around the world. A big thank you to you if you've recently subscribed. The ever-increasing numbers give us ever-increasing options, and please do subscribe if you haven't already, and share the program. Feel free to repost, retweet. I give you permission because I run the company. And the more you retweet it, the more people will come here and the more programs we can make. This is the home of free speech. And let's remember, I don't want to beat the mainstream. I want to be the mainstream, as do all of our presenters. That's also why there is still an open invitation. If you've got a good idea for a program, let us know. If we think it's got sufficient merit, then we're likely to make it. So there's your opportunity to have your creative name in lights. Also, good news, we're moving apace with the arts and creativity channel as well. That'll be our second channel, so watch this space. And I'm hoping that we're going to be making some progress on the program I love the most, Mr. Calamari over in Corfu. If you haven't seen that trailer, I'll show it again some point during the week. Now, the big story in politics is what's going on with Labour and who's going to be the next government. Lots of parties seeming want to replace the old guard. Tory, Labour, Lib Dem, also known as the Uni Party, are in a lot of trouble. You see it every day on the news. Politicians crashing and burning, people making fools of themselves. But David Lammy's not the only person in the news. And who is coming up? There are some new parties. The relatively new Reform UK is doing very well in the polls at the moment. Has it got staying power, people ask? Well, there was a very interesting by-election result recently. We'll talk about that separately on a different program. But they're not alone. There's Advance UK. That's Ben Habib's party. We recently interviewed him. And the SDP. Now, that's the Social Democrat Party, sorry. And that's not a new party at all. It's been around since the late 1970s. Oh, yes. Over 4 decades of experience. And at one point, the SDP was ahead of all the parties in the polls. It touched over 50% in early 1982 before the Falklands War, run by Margaret Thatcher, down in the deep south, very, very inhospitable place to have a war, changed the electoral calculus again. But the SDP has form, and it's also been quite important in my life because I was a Liberal Democrat, I was a Lib Dem MP, and the Liberal Democrats are built from the merger between the SDP and the Liberals. So this isn't a new kid on the block. It's an old stage with a lot of maturity and a lot of experience. And the same could be said of their leader, the man who, if the SDP got 326 members of parliament at the next election, would be the prime minister. Ever considered it that way? I suppose you do quite often. It's William Clouston. Good to see you, sir.
Good to be here, Lembit. Thank you.
I can't remember. It's been such a long time. Is it Social Democrat Party or Social and Democratic Party? I just can't remember.
Social Democratic Party.
I was wrong on both counts.
You were right first time, actually. Yeah.
And then I suddenly got nervous about it.
Yeah.
I was actually at the very last wind-up conference around 1988, I think, of the SDP. And at that point, the acting leader was the late now Sir Robert McLennan, who became a very good friend. Were you involved back then?
I was. My father was a founding member. It was actually 82. And he left the Labour Party and put his shoulder behind the SDP. And it was a massive part of my life for the whole of the 80s, actually. The first general election I fought on was 83 in Durham City. David Stoker was our candidate. And it was the first time, actually, that I realised the unfairness of the electoral system, because the SDP got only 1.5% less than the Labour Party. They got 27%, we got 25.5%. They got 210 seats, and we got, 23, something like that.
Yeah, it did seem a little bit rough, actually. What did you make of David Owen, the then leader, the man who used to do the job that you're doing now?
He is one of my political heroes, and I'm still in touch with him, and he is very encouraging to us. And in fact, I spoke at Liverpool University a couple of years ago at the David. They have his archive right the way back from when he was Foreign Secretary and all the way back at Liverpool University. And there was a sort of David Owen Day, and a lot of academics came along. And I was honoured to speak that day about the social market economy. So yes, he is a political hero. The other main political hero I have is Peter Shaw, who is an old Labour stalwart.
Oh, he's a very old stage, a very old stage. You actually mentioned Durham, and at my request, we have a picture of you performing in Durham. Do you recall this debate?
I do, yes. That was at the start of the year. Yes, Labour has already failed. That was great fun, actually. It was fantastic. Funnily enough, Lembit, I was asked. I was at Durham University. I did my philosophy postgrad there, and it's my home city, so it was wonderful to go back. But I was asked a few months after that to speak at the Oxford Union, and then they didn't reply. I gave them some dates, and they didn't have the decency to reply. But they have some other problems, don't they?
They have some other problems. Before we go into that, and let us indulge ourselves for a short while. The reason I wanted this to be put up is because I have debated in that very same spot time after time. I must have debated a dozen times there, certainly 10, and I loved it. That union debating society is easily as good as the other, in my view, the big three: Cambridge, Oxford, and Bristol.
Yeah.
Did you win?
We lost, but we won the arguments. Actually, I think people found it was we were a little bit early to say that already failed, because we were only a few months into the government. But actually, we did very creditably. I think we lost by about 30. And actually, in a modern university now, Lembit, that for our position was very good.
Yeah, pretty much so. The other thing we have in common is that I did study at the University of Bristol, same subject as you, philosophy. We're both qualified to think, which is a rare commodity in British politics, I would suggest now.
Well, one of the things that I learned at Durham doing philosophy was that I was a second-rate mind, in that you're up against some people that are absolutely first-rate, and they'll get the distinctions. I mean, it's not to say that I wouldn't get the right answer. Quite often I would, but it's the speed, isn't it, Lembit? I got a very good 2-1 there. So anyway,
I scraped my 2-1. You're at the top. I was at the bottom. I actually had 4 2-1s, 4 2-2s, and the 9th paper was split between 2-1 and 2-2. But they gave me a 2-1 because I'd been president of the Students' Union, and they thought that had brought some credit to the philosophy department. I'm not sure if I did or not. I'm not sure if they're still proud of me, but there we go.
I always, in fact, in my I don't get 2 2s at all. I get 2 1s generally, but I think the only thing I got a first for was the knowledge and reality exam. I got a first for that, and I got 69% for my dissertation, which is a little bit annoying. I'd have preferred 65, to be honest.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I know somebody who's she's so clever. I wouldn't say she's a genius, but she's really smart. And she spent her second year just traveling around and having fun. And they said to her at the end, "We're giving you a 2-1. You deserve a first, but not for what you did in your second year."
Yeah, fair enough.
That was that. Yeah. And he thought it was a fair trade. A whole different story. Now, let's talk about the SDP first of all, then we can be a bit more expansive. I've mentioned Reform UK. They're doing well in the polls. Not as well as SDP did in its heyday, but they're doing well in the polls. Still only have a handful of votes. We've got Advance UK, which Ben Habib, its leader, says has 37,000 members and growing. There's some other smaller ones, the Heritage Party with David Curtin. What is it that you would say justifies the SDP performing in a crowded market?
That's a really good question, Lembit, because people ask me that a lot. I think, to be fair, the other parties that you mentioned, including Advance and Reform themselves, and probably the Tories, in the political compass, are probably the bottom right-hand quadrant. So they They're small government. They're not in the same quadrant as us. We're, if anything, and they sort of have libertarian tendencies socially. I don't think many of them are not terribly socially conservative. The SDP is much more, I guess, old-fashioned, really, socially conservative, but we want the water industry run and operated by the state, and we want the railways ditto, and we want power generation and distribution and transmission under state control, and we want the state to build some houses. So that makes us a little bit different to the others. I think some of them might try to come on the turf, but I don't think they really believe it. And the other thing is we're not free trade purists at all. We're much more Vancian and Trumpian on trade economics. I have some trade protection, frankly. So that makes us very different on the economics to the other parties. And so I would say we're the only party in that quadrant. So we'll keep on trucking.
I think what you're talking about is what's called the Nolan chart. I'll see if we can get a picture of that at some point. I'm very fond of the Nolan chart, actually. But just before we go further, you're quite keen on bigger government, then?
No,
Why?
I don't. It's a misnomer, really. I've never argued for a big state. I want an efficient state that does what the state should do, and it should be no bigger than that. I actually think the state's too big now.
Okay.
I think it crowds out a lot of things that it shouldn't be involved in. But we're really in a mess because the things that it should do, it's inept in. So I think my basic view of the state is it can tax and regulate and try and control people's lives, but it's inept at actually doing something. So if I want it to generate some power, it's not very good at doing that. It outsources that. If I wanted to build some houses for young people to start families, it outsources that, and it's inept in doing so. So I've never argued for a big state. I want an efficient state. I want a state that is capable of doing things that make a difference to people's lives.
Oh, here we are. Here's a version of the Nolan chart. Sometimes it's portrayed as a square, but I quite like the look of this one. I take it this is what you're referring to. It's actually a very simple concept. You can be in the center, or you can be liberal conservative, usually about the economy, and you can be libertarian and statist about freedoms. I would tend to think of the economy one where it says liberal. I would tend to say massive intervention, and I would put conservative as very little intervention. But it depends. You end up into these weird arguments. Is it conservative to have small government or big government? You don't really know these days. It's all got a bit messy. The axis I find really interesting. I don't really think that governments are good at running economies. When they leave them alone, it works better. When they're very interventionist, it doesn't. What really bothers me is the libertarian statist or libertarian authoritarian axis. I'm an intense libertarian. I'd let you do what you want, even if it harms you, but not other people, as long as you understand you're doing harm. I'd let you smoke. I'd let you drink. I would consider regulated drugs use, because I don't think you can ban addiction. But when it comes to economy, I'm terribly disillusioned by the state of the parties. Just in terms of the libertarian, authoritarian, or libertarian statist agenda, where does the SDP stand?
Well, you bring something up that we probably disagree with you on. We wouldn't legalize drugs. I don't think that's going to be very sensible. And take an example I saw today, Lembit. It was a photograph of a whole series of tents. People were just sleeping in the streets in central London. I wouldn't have that. We would ban vagrancy, and we would stop that, because the public realm matters. And I'm not interested in that sort of freedom. So I think we have what you would probably describe as quite bossy tendencies in terms of public realm and public order and so on. So we're certainly not libertarians in that sense at all. And again, I would argue, people, I think one of the problems that we've got in the West particularly is a breakdown of what used to be normal behavior. We have a lot of marriage breakup. We have a lot of individualism that I think has gone too far. So in fact, I think in the I-we balance, we're much more communitarian than libertarian.
I struggle now with the drugs agenda. In the past, I've said if heroin were legal, I still wouldn't take it. Whiskey's legal, but I hardly ever drink it. Smoking's legal, and I've never been a smoker. So what I think is if it's legalized, then we take away the aftermarket. We take away the motivation to get people hooked on drugs because there's no profit in it anymore. Because you manage it in the same way that the United Kingdom did do till about 1973. But I don't want to go too far down that path because probably...
Yeah, I mean, my basic position is that I go down city centres and town centres around the UK, and I don't want them stinking of skunk. And I'm fed, a lot of people are fed up with that. So I would, you want that stopped. It actually inhibits ordinary citizens from going and enjoying a public space. I think that's downstream of the whole liberalisation that we've had, and we would stand against it. As I say, we would be considered quite old-fashioned. Of course, if you're a social conservative, and we are, faith, flag, and family, really, we always get accused of wanting to go back to the 1950s, and I always pull people to the leg and say, well, it's not the 1950s, it's the 1750s that we want.
Very good. Well, now, so that we don't keep returning to reform. Reform's dominating a lot of the media agenda, even though I would say the mainstream really is begrudging whenever they talk about it, because they seem to be concerned. BBC very scared, I think, of the prospect of a big arrival from a big arrival of trouble in Downing Street if Farage wins. But Farage is very much the man of the moment at the moment. He's been portrayed as the next prime minister. The odds are in his favour. What do you make of the reform position? As I said, let's get this out of the way and we can talk more about SDP and your views.
Well, in as much as the SDP was formed really to rid ourselves of the duopoly and break the mould of British politics, I wish them well. I mean, I hope they succeed in that respect. I have nothing against them as individuals. I get on with many of them. In fact, I spent Saturday night with some of them. I have no problem with that. I did an electoral pact with them last election, 24 seats. It was we agreed not to stand against each other. Got on very well. I did the pact with Richard Tice. When Nigel came along, I think the pact was under a little bit of strain, but we just about got there. I think there's a lot of enthusiasm for them, and the public there's a desperation actually, Lembit. I think the public are primarily using reform as a cudgel to lash out at the system because it's let them down. Both major parties and the Lib Dems as well have let them down. So I can understand it totally. I understand people's frustration. Whether reform have worked out their political platform properly yet is uncertain. Certainly some of these major things, like Lembit, if I asked you to ask a reform frontbench spokesman, what is your trade policy? Is it pro-tariff? Is it pro-trade protection? They don't know because they haven't really worked it out. So some of these major things, they need to work out what they need. Ditto housing, I don't think they've got a serious plan on that. But I'm not hostile to them. They've very grown up when we did the pact about the differences we had on economics, very mature about it. They were quite relaxed about it. So I wish them well generally, but they are our opponents in the seats we fight. And unless we come together at the end of the decade somehow, and I'd be up for that, whether they'd want to do that again is a different matter. We'll see. So wait and see. But I'd warn people who are very confident about them winning the election. Actually, history says that the Tories recover somehow. I mean, it might sound strange. And I actually think the Labour Party are more vulnerable than the Tories politically now because they're in government and making a hell of a lot of mistakes. So it's a long time until the next election. Anything could happen.
Yeah, I don't need to go further now because I always enjoy you coming on, and I know our viewers do too, so we can talk about more of that in the future. But I want to talk about, particularly want to talk about a couple of policy areas. And one is environmental policy, another one is international policy. But let's start with the environment. You've been quite active on this. You've said that energy prices are to blame for Britain's poor productivity. Where do you stand on this? Now, I'll put my cards on the table. I don't want to trick anybody on my shows. I don't think there's a climate emergency. I think that it's physically impossible for the minuscule that we take towards the carbon dioxide budget to be wagging the dog of the climate. I just don't think it's happening. I think the climate's changing, but not because of the tiny amount that we put in. But maybe you have a different view. In your words, what do you mean about the problem, about Britain's productivity, and what's your view of the climate agenda as a whole?
Right. Well, the first question is there an energy crisis? And in Britain, there certainly is. So the facts are that we have the highest industrial energy prices in the developed world, right? That's the first thing. So we also produce too little power. Grid supply of electricity peaked in 2005, and policy is now aimed at basically rationing it. That's not sensible. I mean, energy is the master industry. If you don't have a cheap, abundant energy, you will not be a successful industrial economy. So in summary, we have an energy crisis. There's too little power, at too high a cost, and we're too reliant on imports. We import about £40 billion worth of energy a year, which is crazy, from Norway and on the interconnectors from France, from their nuclear fleet. So that's a problem, and the consequences of that, Lembit, are lost productivity. Now, our economics team actually quantified it using an OECD model, and quantified the lost productivity in the last 25 years is 3 trillion. It's as big as the whole economy.
3 trillion.
3 trillion, yes. It's catastrophic. Year by year, you're losing about 190 billion of productivity. And why do we know this? I mean, the fact is, energy-intensive industry is going out of business in Britain. Yeah. You've got ammonia plants closing on Teesside. You've got cement plants closing. We now import a third of the cement we use. So every time this happens, your tax base is destroyed, and you have a chancellor that is more and more desperate to beat money out of people's pockets. Yeah. So it's in a doom loop. So this is very, very serious. So we've put a plan together to stabilize the grid. You need about 40 gigawatts of extra power. We proposed gas-powered power stations and coal-fired. It's quite a controversial thing to say, but coal is actually cheaper, and this is an emergency for the British economy. And after that, you need to have a new fleet of nuclear power, and that will sort it. Now, my view on net zero is that it's catastrophic. The net zero policy for the UK is partly responsible for this crisis. There are two causes. One of the other causes is actually the privatization and the abandonment of planning, because the CEGB used to do a very good job actually before Thatcher got to it. But yeah, the net zero renewables agenda is crazy. It doesn't work. I try and explain this. There's lots of technical ways of explaining it, but the facts are that they're not reliable. If the wind isn't blowing or the sun isn't shining, you don't get any power at all. And that means you need two systems, right, Lembit? You need a real system, which is grid, which is basic base load, which is gas-fired power stations or nuclear or something like that. And then you have a pretendy system, which is renewable. So that's it. And the other thing is, remember, and I think a lot of your viewers will know this instinctively, that oil and gas is so efficient, you can tax it. And renewables are so inefficient, you have to chuck millions at it. Still doesn't work.
Here's one of the wind farms. I loathe the ignorance which pervades the old parties. My two biggest objections to the Uni Party, Labour, Tory, Lib Dem, my two biggest objections are international policy, we'll talk about later, and the environmental policy, because just as you say, I have no doubt that these monstrosities we're seeing on the screen there are the most expensive power that you can possibly have. But then we've got people like Ed Miliband. He doesn't have a clue. He just doesn't understand any of it. He literally he's a scientific ignoramus. He wants to bury carbon dioxide.
It's a numerate. He's actually an extremely dangerous individual, Miliband. This is very, very serious for the whole economy. And he keeps on saying that prices are going to, energy prices are going to go down for industry and domestic use. It won't. It's just going to go up. There's, it's set in stone now, this crazy policy. All of the renewals are low energy density. You need large networks that are in the wrong place. It's crazy. What you need is proper heavy lifting, brute force. You need nuclear power or big power generation in a sensible place close to where it's required. And that's what we propose. And that's unless we wise up to this very quickly, the UK economy is just going to go down the tubes, I'm afraid.
Well, one thing I sometimes feel reform could be more explicit about is where they stand on climate change. I explicitly say that the physics of the climate absolutely precludes any possibility that our minuscule contribution to the atmosphere of CO2 does anything. If anything, it helps a tiny amount, makes the world a bit greener because it's the gas of life, carbon dioxide. The idea that the 6 atoms per million in the atmosphere that we add, 5.5 of which are reabsorbed anyway, more than the 5.5, can do harm. It's preposterous. But we've got these, in my view, ignorant people in powerful positions wrecking our agenda. Now, I've obviously insulted you if you think that there is a climate emergency, but I'm suspecting you don't.
No, I don't think there is in that sense. And I don't think any policy that international organizations or climate conferences have made any difference, Lembit, to it. That's my point. I mean, climate change is ubiquitous. We've always had climate change of some sort throughout history and the ages. It's there. Mankind has probably made a contribution. I'm not particularly interested in arguing that point. I'm more interested in the fact that the UK's, if you're interested in CO2 output, the UK's output is 1%, and there's nothing whatsoever going to change if we reduce that by half or anything else. CO2 concentrations are going to go up a little bit anyway. Just was what India and China do. So it's a moot point, I think. I prefer to look at what the UK economy needs, be realistic about this, and get some industry back.
We'll come back to the other areas in just a moment. I'm talking with William Clouston, who is the leader of a venerable party, actually older than my old party, the Lib Dems, around for coming on to almost half a century. And we're discussing what they've got that the others haven't got. Somebody else you might want to watch is Tim Scott. Tim Scott Uncancelled. You'll find them on the archive at YouTube, Unprecedented TV. Do please subscribe. Tim Scott, who is the head of the Freedom Association, tends to have a very free-spirited look at some of the news that you haven't seen. Great value from him. He's taking a break if you're watching this live, but he's coming back as well. But today we have somebody else of independence of thought, and that's William Clouston. Is it Clouston? Or am I saying it right?
No, you're not. But it doesn't. It's Clouston.
How do you say it?
Clouston. Yeah, it's Clouston. We have a problem, as in Houston. We have a problem. It's an Orcadian name. It's from Orkney, so it's Scottish. And it's Clouston, but don't worry about it.
You're very polite. I get many permutations. My name isn't actually Lembit Öpik. Technically, it should be pronounced Lembit Öpik, but no one says that except in Estonia and in Finland. Lembit Öpik is more alliterative, so I stick with that. Amazingly, it's an anagram of as I often like to tell people, an anagram of the phrase "I like to be MP." It was an incredible piece of foresight by my parents. Yeah,
there you go.
Before the break, we were talking about the climate situation, and very keen to have you on again to talk about that. But let's talk about the international situation. One of the things that's been kicking up quite a lot, really, over the last year, is what people consider not everybody, but many people consider the absolutely nonsensical concept of giving away bits of the British Commonwealth without a referendum, without asking people. I think you may know what that place is, Chagos Islands there. The Labour Party has decided, in its infinite impotence, as in they can't influence important things, to mess around at the edges. And David Lammy, who we were talking about intelligence before, is no great intellect, has been defending the idea of not just giving the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, but giving them a golden goodbye for 100 years. 30 billion pounds. I'm loading the question a bit, but what do you make of this? How did we get here?
It's shameful. We got here by having an elite that are embarrassed about our imperial past and our colonial past. And someone like David Lammy is the sort of person, and actually Starmer is the same, that would believe we should never have had this territory in the first place. But actually, if you look at the detail of this case, there is no case to give it up at all. After the Treaty of Paris in the early 1800s, this territory was obtained by Britain, and it's remained British sovereign territory ever since. There is no case to give it up voluntarily. I think they've been mugged, Lembit, by a UN General Assembly, which is packed full of anti-Western states. And there's a long, long history of this sort of thing. You've got an anti-Western majority in the UN, and there was an advisory decision. Advisory, it wasn't mandatory on it. I would have ignored that and carried on. And they didn't have the bottle to do it. And now they've given the territory away and paid for the privilege. So it's an outrage. It shows Labour's incompetence, and it shows their lack of patriotism, and it has no basis in reality.
That's the problem with people like David Lammy. He's just not, in my view, up to the job. You listen to him talking, and he's obviously totally out of his depth. I'm really looking forward to enjoying the highlights from his now inevitable stand-ins for the globe-trotting Keir Starmer. David Lammy plus PMQs. Now that's going to be an entertainment. What's not so funny is people like David Lammy in positions like Deputy Prime Minister. That's the thing. It's just, we have, in my view, the most ignorant, as in literally the least intelligent cabinet in living memory, possibly ever.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the quality of Labour's front bench is very poor. And actually, we can talk about what's going to happen if Starmer gets the boot after the May elections next year. But Lammy, again, to look at what he actually says, he's on record for calling for reparations against Britain. So I don't think someone that wants to punish Britain in that way financially and morally is the right person to be leading us and looking after the national interest. It's obviously just a mismatch.
It seems to me a total mismatch. And when I was elected in 1997 into Parliament, when I was there, the big beasts were leaving. The big Conservative beasts were leaving, whether you like them or not. Norman Tebbit, Margaret Thatcher was still shuffling around in the annals of Parliament. You had Ken Clarke, to an extent, John Major, but you could argue maybe he was part of the decline. I like him as a person, but he wasn't so much of a leader. Now we've got Keir Starmer, a man who we always make a point of playing it, said he couldn't even get this line right. He said they called for the return of the sausages. I was like, how could you make a mistake like that in your leader's speech? How?
You can, it's not the best, but I mean, people do make errors with that sort of thing. It's not that really. It's his general liberal, legalistic view of the world. It's just a low correspondence reality. I think Starmer's government has the feel, for a start, it has the feel of a government that's been in a decade and is despised. So the public's view is very, very low. But his just low correspondence with reality. He's not the whole of his type of approach, sort of managerial, legal approach to things, is not what is required now. Look at the migrant crisis. He's incapable of dealing with it because he's in favour of all these international protocols. So I'm afraid he's exactly what you don't need.
Yeah, it's lawfare. They call it lawfare, and I watch him and I think to myself, how can someone have got so far with so little? He's like dead behind the eyes. A very good friend of mine describes him as in possession of shallow consciousness. He doesn't understand things. And when you watch him, he's guessing. His coalition of the willing. Let's talk about that. To me, Keir Starmer has written us out of the global script. Even when he meets people like Donald Trump, there's just no comparison between the two. You know,
it's painful.
It's awkward. There he is, and Trump clearly doesn't rate him. We won't play it again today. We've played it a lot. But when Keir Starmer flew over for a 60-second photo opportunity in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, he actually ended up with a massive own goal because Trump turned his back on him. And it was just, you could see, anyone who understands body language, you could see that what Keir Starmer thought was happening is that he was being asked to come and speak because he looks at the microphone like that. And anybody who's a public speaker knows what that means. And
it's
instead,
brutal. Yeah.
So go on.
He's not. I don't think he's going to last. I think the worrying thing, though, Lembit, is that if you look at potential, I mean, a lot of people talk about whether this Labour government's going to last the day. It will.
Yeah.
There's no doubt at all. Under our system, they've got 170 majority. That's the largest parliamentary majority since 1820. The Labour Party will definitely get to the bitter end. And I think all the historical precedent is that they will last that long. I mean, they're not going to go early. I can tell you that.
No.
But
Why would they? Why would
the
they?
leader? Well, the leader will change. I think Starmer will be ousted. But the worrying thing is, and I've got friends in the Labour Party that advise me. The worrying thing is that the most likely successor is actually Miliband, and it might sound very odd. Look at you, you've got your head in your hands.
Of course I do. I mean,
yeah, but
there he is.
There
he is.
Do you know why? Because actually, in terms of the Labour Party membership and the PLP and the new MPs particularly, he is the most popular. Look at Labour list, the detail. My friends in the Labour Party say that he is more likely to be next Prime Minister than anyone else, and that is of concern. And it should be laughable, but I'm afraid, I can't say. I want to watch what I say on air, but I've said to my friends that but clearly the man isn't in touch with reality. Let's put it like that. And they'll say, well, the members are like that. So there we go. Yeah,
I didn't expect you to say that. No, I actually would quite like Ed Miliband to take over from Keir Starmer as long as it's in the current term of Labour government, because it would absolutely guarantee that they will lose the next election. The worst thing for those of us who think that Labour is a disaster would be someone like Andy Burnham, because he's quite good. But
he is quite good, and particularly good on transport. And he's actually a good politician, but he's not well liked in the Labour Party to the extent that Miliband is. I'm just telling you that. Just advising your viewers that that's not true, and he hasn't got a seat, and the PLP don't like him as much as Miliband, so that isn't happening, and I see no prospect of it happening. So there you go. I think, and actually, even if it was him, I see no prospect whatsoever the Labour Party can win the next election. They're going to be absolutely destroyed.
There are some others we need to talk about. Quick word about arguably one of your competitors now, the former leader of the Labour Party. That's Sultana and Corbyn.
Yeah.
You know the usual nickname Fruit and Nut, which is a bit harsh. I like Jeremy Corbyn. I know his brother very well. Piers Corbyn is very active in challenging the climate hoax. If Corbyn plays it right, he still has a large historical vote. Is it possible that he could do to the Labour Party what Reform has been doing to the Tory vote?
To some extent, that will happen, Lembit. So that I'm actually quite keen on this. Your party, whatever they want to call it, establishing itself. And also remember, there is a just as there are conservatives, and it would be nice if there was a conservative party. There are people that have strong hard left views on these things, and they need representing. And I think it would be fine for them to get together. But the earliest, I mean, they've got a lot of support and they've got a lot of money actually. But whether they can get on is a different matter. I mean, it doesn't look brilliant from a personality point of view, but certainly the voters are there. There's probably about 10-12% of the public would vote for this immediately, and it would certainly be a big problem for Labour. And just selfishly, the seats that we target in the big cities in the north, particularly that we want to win next May, and we've got a few that we are on our list. It would make it a little bit easier for us to take them. What happens is, because the public are asking for a multi-party system. We've got a first past the post is supports the duopoly, but the public, the demand is there for a broader thing. So what happens in seats is that where you might have to get 40% to win them previously, the winning post is now about 25% in some of these places. So probably good for us.
The last area I want to talk about, I'm not intending to cover everything today because it's pleasant to have you on, and hopefully we can cover other things too, but there's the grooming gangs. They've been making a lot of the inquiry, and the analysis has been making a lot of noise recently. Very pointedly, two victims of grooming resigned from essentially the investigation because they said it was a sham. And I would say that I think this is really more what you say. You feel that Sadiq Khan's got himself into hot water with this, the Mayor of London.
Yeah, but before I talk about that, the two resignations are very significant, and it was reported by Charlie Peters on another in another channel. It's very serious, this, because what Labour is doing is dragging its heels and trying to alter the terms. Another thing they're trying to do is broaden the terms to look at any child exploitation. I think that's a deliberate attempt to try and water down the inquiry and stop the inquiry looking at the authorities in the particular cities and towns that they controlled. So they're very nervous about this because the police authorities and the local councils and the city councils that presided over this disaster, this outrage, are all virtually all controlled by Labour. So they're not very comfortable about it. So yeah, I'm very concerned about that. But in London, Susan Hall, the Tory leader, has asked Sadiq Khan on a number of occasions, is there any evidence for grooming gang activity in London? He is in complete denial about it. He said it several times. But the Daily Express a couple of days ago reported on evidence that he has been given evidence of it, and he's had this evidence for some time, and he's still in denial and pretending that there's nothing to see here. And actually, as you know, a bit of history in politics, it's not the event sometimes, it's the lies and the denial, isn't it?
That's right. Sadiq Khan's got himself in a lot of hot water. I saw him in this really shameful performance at Mayor's Questions, and he was trying to trick, I don't know if it was the Conservative leader, I think it was Susan Hall. And I think she was being pushed by him. He said he was trying to get her to say something he could then accuse her of being racist about. But just there's no doubt at all that in the public consciousness, at least for those who have an opinion, Labour has been complicit in covering this up. And you can see all the parties have had problems with various sexual questions of especially in the very awkward area of and very disturbing area of paedophilia. But it looks to me like Labour is wanting to turn a blind eye, as it says in this. I think this was from The Sun, this article, because it's really awkward in their core vote. They don't want to annoy that core vote.
There's truth in this, and actually, it's worth, if your viewers haven't seen this, it's worth having a look at the Susan Hall, Sadiq Khan clip, because it's an absolute classic liberal left system of diversity play. So what Susan Hall asks a reasonable question, she's doing her job, and Khan bats it back, but he tries to stop. He tries to say, "Go on, say it. Say Pakistani grooming gang or Muslim grooming gang," and she's very modest and doesn't say that actually. But he's trying to bully her into not saying that, and so he's playing it. You know, and actually she did sort of back down actually, and he got his way on that. But the fact is, I'm just going to tell you what I believe, right? Because this is a free speech channel, isn't it? I think this is a racially motivated category of crime, and and when you look at the profile of the victims in places like Rotherham, these are white working class girls that have been targeted partly because they were white working class girls. That's what I believe, and that's what the evidence is, because that's what the inquiries have shown. I think that's very uncomfortable for the Labour Party. Why? Because it's a white victim and a minority perpetrator, and they just can't handle that, I'm afraid. But that, I'm afraid, is the truth. And if it's the truth, then we're better off saying it. And I also think, Lembit, that it's better to say it and put the truth out than it is to cover it up and destroy public trust in these towns by doing what Labour has actually done, which is a disgrace.
Final question, really. We're almost out of time. The SDP, I take it you've implied it already, actually. You intend to contest local government elections and also the next general election. It's an obvious question, which we'll go into more in the future. But if Reform and Advance UK and some of the other ones said, look, let's all work together, let's have a non-aggression pact, how would you feel about that? Or was that a betrayal of principles?
No, I would do. I have a record of doing this. I worked with Reform last time, despite the fact that we had different economic ideas, and we did it like adults, and it held, and it was beneficial. We saved deposits, and we got a few thousand votes in the seats that we did it in, and so I would do it again with the right people. As long as it's good faith, I would do it for the good of the country.
Interesting. Thank you. We run out of time. I really appreciate you coming on, and there's lots more to explore there. And, you know, I love the idea of opening the coal-fired power stations again. The gas of life, the gas of life coming out of those cooling towers or the chimneys, feeding the plants and heating our homes. That's William Clouston, the leader of the SDP, which is not a new kid on the block. It's a long-standing party. Thanks very much to William, but also thanks to you for watching. Make up your own minds, and we'll have him back as well. Don't forget to subscribe at Unprecedented TV on the YouTube, and you can follow me on X. And do share your comments. I'm always happy to have a dialogue with you as well. That is it for today's show. We will also, of course, have some other great shows coming up. Just have a look at the archive. You'll enjoy them. They've got a good shelf life. Unlike milk, they don't go off. I'm Lembit Öpik. That was Lembit Öpik live here on Unprecedented TV. Have a great day.
Immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The return of the sausages.